CostasNarrativeXP presents. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter 86. The Trial. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Albert had arrived at Beauchamp's door. The valet de chambre had received orders to usher him in at once. Beauchamp was in his bath. "Here I am," Albert said. "Well, my poor friend," replied Beauchamp, "I expected you. I need not say I think you are too faithful and too kind to have spoken of that painful circumstance. Your having sent for me is another proof of your affection. So, without losing time, tell me, have you the slightest idea whence this terrible blow proceeds?" "I think I have some clue." "But first tell me all the particulars of this shameful plot." Beauchamp proceeded to relate to the young man, who was overwhelmed with shame and grief, the following facts. 2 days previously, the article had appeared in another paper besides L'Impartial, and, what was more serious, one that was well known as a government paper. Beauchamp was breakfasting when he read the paragraph. He sent immediately for a cabriolet, and hastened to the publisher's office. Although professing diametrically opposite principles with those of the editor of the other paper, Beauchamp, as it sometimes, we may say often, happens, was his intimate friend. The editor was reading, with apparent delight, a leading article in the same paper on beet sugar, probably a composition of his own. "Ah, pardieu," said Beauchamp. "With the paper in your hand, my friend, I need not tell you the cause of my visit." "Are you interested in the sugar question?" asked the editor of the ministerial paper. "No," replied Beauchamp. "I have not considered the question. A totally different subject interests me." "What is it?" "The article relative to Morcerf." "Indeed, is it not a curious affair?" "So curious that I think you are running a great risk of a prosecution for defamation of character." "Not at all. We have received with the information all the requisite proofs, and we are quite sure M. de Morcerf will not raise his voice against us. Besides, it is rendering a service to one's country to denounce these wretched criminals who are unworthy of the honor bestowed on them." Beauchamp was thunderstruck. "Who, then, has so correctly informed you?" asked he. "For my paper, which gave the first information on the subject, has been obliged to stop for want of proof, and yet we are more interested than you in exposing M. de Morcerf, as he is a peer of France, and we are of the opposition." "Oh, that is very simple. We have not sought to scandalize. This news was brought to us. A man arrived yesterday from Yanina, bringing a formidable array of documents, and when we hesitated to publish the accusatory article, he told us it should be inserted in some other paper." Beauchamp understood that nothing remained but to submit, and left the office to dispatch a courier to Morcerf. But he had been unable to send to Albert the following particulars, as the events had transpired after the messenger's departure, namely, that the same day a great agitation was manifest in the House of Peers among the usually calm members of that dignified assembly. Everyone had arrived almost before the usual hour, and was conversing on the melancholy event which was to attract the attention of the public towards one of their most illustrious colleagues. Some were perusing the article, others making comments and recalling circumstances which substantiated the charges still more. The Count of Morcerf was no favorite with his colleagues. Like all upstarts, he had had recourse to a great deal of haughtiness to maintain his position. The true nobility laughed at him, the talented repelled him, and the honorable instinctively despised him. He was, in fact, in the unhappy position of the victim marked for sacrifice. The finger of God once pointed at him. Everyone was prepared to raise the hue and cry. The Count of Morcerf alone was ignorant of the news. He did not take in the paper containing the defamatory article, and had passed the morning in writing letters and in trying a horse. He arrived at his usual hour, with a proud look and insolent demeanour. He alighted, passed through the corridors, and entered the house without observing the hesitation of the doorkeepers or the coolness of his colleagues. Business had already been going on for half an hour when he entered. Everyone held the accusing paper, but, as usual, no one liked to take upon himself the responsibility of the attack. At length an honourable peer, Morcerf's acknowledged enemy, ascended the tribune with that solemnity which announced that the expected moment had arrived. There was an impressive silence. Morcerf alone knew not why such profound attention was given to an orator who was not always listened to with so much complacency. The Count did not notice the introduction, in which the speaker announced that his communication would be of that vital importance that it demanded the undivided attention of the House. But at the mention of Janina and Colonel Fernand, he turned so frightfully pale that every member shuddered and fixed his eyes upon him. Moral wounds have this peculiarity. They may be hidden, but they never close, always painful, always ready to bleed when touched. They remain fresh and open in the heart. The article having been read during the painful hush that followed, a universal shudder pervaded the assembly, and immediately the closest attention was given to the orator as he resumed his remarks. He stated his scruples and the difficulties of the case. It was the honour of M. de Morcerf, and that of the whole house, he proposed to defend, by provoking a debate on personal questions, which are always such painful themes of discussion. He concluded by calling for an investigation, which might dispose of the calumnious report before it had time to spread, and restore M. de Morcerf to the position he had long held in public opinion. Morcerf was so completely overwhelmed by this great and unexpected calamity that he could scarcely stammer a few words as he looked around on the assembly. This timidity, which might proceed from the astonishment of innocence as well as the shame of guilt, conciliated some in his favour. For men who are truly generous are always ready to compassionate when the misfortune of their enemy surpasses the limits of their hatred. The President put it to the vote, and it was decided that the investigation should take place. The Count was asked what time he required to prepare his defence. Morcerf's courage had revived when he found himself alive after this horrible blow. "My lords," answered he, "it is not by time I could repel the attack made on me by enemies unknown to me, and doubtless hidden in obscurity. It is immediately, and by a thunderbolt, that I must repel the flash of lightning which, for a moment, startled me. Oh, that I could, instead of taking up this defence, shed my last drop of blood to prove to my noble colleagues that I am their equal in worth." These words made a favourable impression on behalf of the accused. "I demand, then, that the examination shall take place as soon as possible, and I will furnish the House with all necessary information." "What day do you fix?" asked the President. "Today I am at your service," replied the Count. The President rang the bell. "Does the House approve that the examination should take place today?" "Yes," was the unanimous answer. A committee of 12 members was chosen to examine the proofs brought forward by Morcerf. The investigation would begin at 8 o'clock that evening in the committee room, and if postponement were necessary, the proceedings would be resumed each evening at the same hour. Morcerf asked leave to retire. He had to collect the documents he had long been preparing against the storm, which his sagacity had foreseen. Beauchamp related to the young man all the facts we have just narrated. His story, however, had over ours all the advantage of the animation of living things over the coldness of dead things. Albert listened, trembling now with hope, then with anger, and then again with shame, for from Beauchamp's confidence he knew his father was guilty, and he asked himself how, since he was guilty, he could prove his innocence. Beauchamp hesitated to continue his narrative. "What next?" asked Albert. "What next? My friend, you impose a painful task on me. Must you know all?" Absolutely, and rather from your lips than another's. Muster up all your courage, then, for never have you required it more. Albert passed his hand over his forehead, as if to try his strength, as a man who is preparing to defend his life proves his shield and bends his sword. He thought himself strong enough, for he mistook fever for energy. Go on, said he. The evening arrived. All Paris was in expectation. Many said your father had only to show himself to crush the charge against him. Many others said he would not appear, while some asserted that they had seen him start for Brussels, and others went to the police office to inquire if he had taken out a passport. I used all my influence with one of the committee, a young peer of my acquaintance, to get admission to one of the galleries. He called for me at 7 o'clock, and before anyone had arrived, asked one of the doorkeepers to place me in a box. I was concealed by a column, and might witness the whole of the terrible scene which was about to take place. At 8 o'clock all were in their places, and M. de Morcerf entered at the last stroke. He held some papers in his hand. His countenance was calm, and his step firm, and he was dressed with great care in his military uniform, which was buttoned completely up to the chin. His presence produced a good effect. The committee was made up of liberals, several of whom came forward to shake hands with him. Albert felt his heart bursting at these particulars, but gratitude mingled with his sorrow. He would gladly have embraced those who had given his father this proof of esteem at a moment when his honor was so powerfully attacked. At this moment, one of the doorkeepers brought in a letter for the president. You are at liberty to speak, M. de Morcerf, said the president, as he unsealed the letter, and the count began his defense. I assure you, Albert, in a most eloquent and skilful manner. He produced documents proving that the vizier of Yanina had up to the last moment honored him with his entire confidence, since he had interested him with a negotiation of life and death with the emperor. He produced the ring, his mark of authority, with which Ali Pasha generally sealed his papers, and which the latter had given him, that he might, on his return at any hour of the day or night, gain access to the presence, even in the harem. Unfortunately, the negotiation failed, and when he returned to defend his benefactor, he was dead. But, said the count, so great was Ali Pasha's confidence that on his deathbed he resigned his favorite mistress and her daughter to my care. Albert started on hearing these words. The history of Haydée recurred to him, and he remembered what she had said of that message and ring, and the manner in which she had been sold and made a slave. And what effect did this discourse produce? Anxiously inquired Albert. I acknowledge it affected me, and indeed all the committee also, said Beauchamp. Meanwhile, the president carelessly opened the letter which had been brought to him, but the first lines aroused his attention. He read them again and again, and fixing his eyes on M. de Morcerf. Count, said he, you have said that the vizier of Yanina confided his wife and daughter to your care. Yes, sir, replied Morcerf. But in that, like all the rest, misfortune pursued me. On my return, Vasiliki and her daughter Haydée had disappeared. Did you know them? My intimacy with the Pasha and his unlimited confidence had gained me an introduction to them, and I had seen them above 20 times. Have you any idea what became of them? Yes, sir. I heard they had fallen victims to their sorrow, and perhaps to their poverty. I was not rich. My life was in constant danger. I could not seek them, to my great regret. The president frowned imperceptibly. Gentlemen, said he, you have heard the Comte de Morcerf's defense. Can you, sir, produce any witnesses to the truth of what you have asserted? Alas, no, monsieur, replied the count. All those who surrounded the vizier, or who knew me at his court, are either dead or gone away. I know not where. I believe that I alone, of all my countrymen, survived that dreadful war. I have only the letters of Ali Tepellini, which I have placed before you. The ring, a token of his goodwill, which is here. And lastly, the most convincing proof I can offer, after an anonymous attack, and that is the absence of any witness against my veracity and the purity of my military life. The murmur of approbation ran through the assembly, and at this moment Albert, had nothing more transpired. Your father's cause had been gained. It only remained to put it to the vote, when the president resumed. Gentlemen, and you, monsieur, you will not be displeased, I presume, to listen to one who calls himself a very important witness, and who has just presented himself. He is, doubtless, come to prove the perfect innocence of our colleague. Here is a letter I have just received on the subject. Shall it be read, or shall it be passed over? And shall we take no notice of this incident? Mr. de Morcerf turned pale, and clenched his hands on the papers he held. The committee decided to hear the letter. The Count was thoughtful and silent. The President read, Mr. President, I can furnish the Committee of Inquiry into the conduct of the Lieutenant General, the Count of Morcerf, in Epirus and in Macedonia with important particulars. The President paused, and the Count turned pale. The President looked at his auditors. Proceed, was heard on all sides. The President resumed. I was on the spot at the death of Ali Pasha. I was present during his last moments. I know what has become of Vasiliki and Haydée. I am at the command of the committee, and even claim the honor of being heard. I shall be in the lobby when this note is delivered to you. And who is this witness, or rather this enemy? Asked the Count, in a tone in which there was a visible alteration. We shall know, sir, replied the President. Is the committee willing to hear this witness? Yes, they all said at once. The doorkeeper was called. Is there anyone in the lobby? Said the President. Yes, sir. Who is it? A woman, accompanied by a servant. Everyone looked at his neighbor. Bring her in, said the President. 5 minutes after, the doorkeeper again appeared. All eyes are fixed on the door, and I, said Beauchamp, share the general expectation and anxiety. Behind the doorkeeper walked a woman enveloped in a large veil, which completely concealed her. It was evident, from her figure and the perfumes she had about her, that she was young and fastidious in her tastes, but that was all. The President requested her to throw aside her veil, and it was then seen that she was dressed in the Grecian costume, and was remarkably beautiful. Ah, said Albert, it was she. Who? Haydée. Who told you that? Alas, I guess it. But go on, Beauchamp. You see, I am calm and strong, and yet we must be drawing near the disclosure. Monsieur de Morcerf, continued Beauchamp, looked at this woman with surprise and terror. Her lips were about to pass his sentence of life or death. To the committee, the adventure was so extraordinary and curious that the interest they had felt for the Count's safety became now quite a secondary matter. The President himself advanced to place a seat for the young lady, but she declined availing herself of it. As for the Count, he had fallen on his chair. It was evident that his legs refused to support him. Madame, said the President, you have engaged to furnish the committee with some important particulars respecting the affair at Yanina, and you have stated that you were an eyewitness of the event. I was indeed, said the stranger, with a tone of sweet melancholy, and with the sonorous voice peculiar to the East. But allow me to say that you must have been very young then. I was 4 years old, but as those events deeply concern me, not a single detail has escaped my memory. In what manner could these events concern you? And who are you, that they should have made so deep an impression on you? On them depended my father's life, replied she. I am Haydée, the daughter of Ali Tepelini, Pasha of Yanina, and of Vasiliki, his beloved wife. The blush of mingled pride and modesty which suddenly suffused the cheeks of the young woman, the brilliancy of her eye, and her highly important communication, produced an indescribable effect on the assembly. As for the Count, he could not have been more overwhelmed if a thunderbolt had fallen at his feet and opened an immense gulf before him. Madame, replied the President, bowing with profound respect, allow me to ask one question. It shall be the last. Can you prove the authenticity of what you have now stated? I can, sir, said Haydée, drawing from under a veil a satin satchel highly perfumed. For here is the register of my birth, signed by my father and his principal officers, and that of my baptism, my father having consented to my being brought up in my mother's faith. This letter has been sealed by the Grand Primate of Macedonia and Epirus. And lastly, the record of the sale of my person and that of my mother to the Armenian merchant El-Kabir by the French officer, who, in his infamous bargain with the Porte, had reserved as his part of the booty the wife and daughter of his benefactor, whom he sold for the sum of 400,000 francs. A greenish pallor spread over the Count's cheeks, and his eyes became bloodshot at these terrible imputations, which were listened to by the assembly with ominous silence. Haydée, still calm, but with a calmness more dreadful than the anger of another would have been, handed to the president the record of her sale, written in Arabic. It had been supposed some of the papers might be in Arabian, Romaic, or Turkish language, and the interpreter of the house was in attendance. One of the noble peers, who was familiar with the Arabic language, having studied it during the famous Egyptian campaign, followed with his eyes as the translator read aloud. I, El-Kabir, a slave merchant and purveyor of the harem of His Highness, acknowledge having received for transmission of the sublime emperor, from the French lord, the Count of Monte Cristo, an emerald valued at 800,000 francs, as the ransom of a young Christian slave of 11 years of age, named Haydée, the acknowledged daughter of the late Lord Ali Pasha of Yanina, and of Vasiliki, his favorite, she having been sold to me 7 years previously, with her mother, who had died on arriving at Constantinople, by a French colonel in the service of the Vizier Ali Tepelini, named Fernand Mondego. The above-mentioned purchase was made on His Highness's account, whose mandate I had, for the sum of 400,000 francs. Given at Constantinople by authority of His Highness in the year 1247 of the Hegira. Signed, El-Kabir. That this record should have all due authority, it shall bear the imperial seal, which the vendor is bound to have affixed to it. Near the merchant's signature there was, indeed, the seal of the sublime emperor. A dreadful silence followed the reading of this document. The Count could only stare, and his gaze, fixed as if unconsciously on Haydée, seemed one of fire and blood. Madam, said the president, may reference be made to the Count of Monte Cristo, who is now, I believe, in Paris. Sir, replied Haydée, the Count of Monte Cristo, my foster father, has been in Normandy the last 3 days. Who, then, has counseled you to take this step, one for which the court is deeply indebted to you, and which is perfectly natural, considering your birth and your misfortunes? Sir, replied Haydée, I have been led to take this step from a feeling of respect and grief. Although a Christian, may God forgive me, I have always sought to revenge my illustrious father. Since I set my foot in France and knew the traitor lived in Paris, I have watched carefully. I live retired in the house of my noble protector, but I do it from choice. I love retirement and silence, because I can live with my thoughts and recollections of past days. But the Count of Monte Cristo surrounds me with every paternal care, and I am ignorant of nothing which passes in the world. I learn all in the silence of my apartments. For instance, I see all the newspapers, every periodical, as well as every new piece of music, and by thus watching the course of the life of others, I learned what had transpired this morning in the House of Peers, and what was to take place this evening. Then I wrote. Then, remarked the president, the Count of Monte Cristo knows nothing of your present proceedings. He is quite unaware of them, and I have but one fear, which is that he should disapprove of what I have done. But it is a glorious day for me, continued the young girl, raising her ardent gaze to heaven, that on which I find at last an opportunity of avenging my father. The Count had not uttered one word the whole of this time. His colleagues looked at him, and doubtless pitied his prospects, blighted under the perfumed breath of a woman. His misery was depicted in sinister lines on his countenance. Monsieur de Morcerf, said the president, do you recognize this lady as the daughter of Ali Tepelini, Pasha of Yanina? No, said Morcerf, attempting to rise. It is a base plot, contrived by my enemies. Haydée, whose eyes had been fixed on the door, as if expecting someone, turned hastily, and, seeing the Count standing, shrieked. "You do not know me?" said she. "Well, I fortunately recognize you. You are Fernand de Mondego, the French officer who led the troops of my noble father. It is you who surrendered the castle of Yanina. It is you who, sent by him to Constantinople to treat with the emperor for the life or death of your benefactor, brought back a false mandate granting full pardon. It is you who, with that mandate, obtained the Pasha's ring, which gave you authority over Selim, the far keeper. It is you who stabbed Selim. It is you who sold us, my mother and me, to the merchant El-Kabir. Assassin, assassin, assassin. You have still on your brow your master's blood. Look, gentlemen, all." These words had been pronounced with such enthusiasm and evident truth that every eye was fixed on the Count's forehead, and he himself passed his hand across it, as if he felt Ali's blood still lingering there. "You positively recognize Monsieur de Morcerf as the officer, Fernand Mondego?" "Indeed I do," cried Haydée. "Oh, my mother, it was you who said you were free, you had a beloved father, you were destined to be almost a queen. Look well at that man. It is he who raised your father's head on the point of a spear. It is he who sold us. It is he who forsook us. Look well at his right hand, on which he has a large wound. If you forgot his features, you would know him by that hand, into which fell, one by one, the gold pieces of the merchant El-Kabir. I know him. Ah, let him say now if he does not recognize me." Each word fell like a dagger on Morcerf, and deprived him of a portion of his energy. As she uttered the last, he hid his mutilated hand hastily in his bosom, and fell back on his seat, overwhelmed by wretchedness and despair. This scene completely changed the opinion of the assembly respecting the accused Count. "Count of Morcerf," said the president, "do not allow yourself to be cast down. Answer. Justice of the court is supreme and impartial as that of God. It will not suffer you to be trampled on by your enemies without giving you an opportunity of defending yourself. Shall further inquiries be made? Shall 2 members of the House be sent to Yanina? Speak." Morcerf did not reply. Then all the members looked at each other with terror. They knew the Count's energetic and violent temper. It must be, indeed, a dreadful blow which would deprive him of courage to defend himself. They expected that his stupefied silence would be followed by a fiery outburst. "Well," asked the president, "what is your decision?" "I have no reply to make," said the Count in a low tone. "Has the daughter of Ali Tepellini spoken the truth?" said the president. "Is she, then, the terrible witness to whose charge you dare not plead not guilty? Have you really committed the crimes of which you are accused?" The Count looked around him with an expression which might have softened tigers, but which could not disarm his judges. Then he raised his eyes towards the ceiling, but withdrew them immediately, as if he feared the roof would open and reveal to his distressed view that second tribunal called Heaven, and that other judge named God. Then, with a hasty movement, he tore open his coat, which seemed to stifle him, and flew from the room like a madman. Its footstep was heard one moment in the corridor, then the rattling of his carriage wheels as he was driven rapidly away. "Gentlemen," said the president, when silence was restored, "is the Count of Morcerf convicted of felony, treason, and conduct unbecoming a member of this house?" "Yes," replied all the members of the committee of inquiry with a unanimous voice. Haydée had remained until the close of the meeting. She heard the Count's sentence pronounced without betraying an expression of joy or pity. Then, drawing her veil over her face, she bowed majestically to the councillors, and left with that dignified step which Virgil attributes to his goddesses. Chapter 87. The Challenge. "Then," continued Beauchamp, "I took advantage of the silence and the darkness to leave the house without being seen. The usher who had introduced me was waiting for me at the door, and he conducted me through the corridors to a private entrance opening to the Rue de Vaugirard. I left with mingled feelings of sorrow and delight. Excuse me, Albert, sorrow on your account, and delight with that noble girl, thus pursuing paternal vengeance. Yes, Albert, from whatever source the blow may have proceeded, it may be from an enemy, but that enemy is only the agent of Providence. Albert held his head between his hands. He raised his face, red with shame and bathed in tears, and seizing Beauchamp's arm. "My friend," said he, "my life is ended. I cannot calmly say with you, Providence has struck the blow, but I must discover who pursues me with this hatred, and when I have found him, I shall kill him, or he will kill me. I rely on your friendship to assist me, Beauchamp, if contempt has not banished it from your heart." "Contempt, my friend? How does this misfortune affect you?" "No. Happily, that unjust prejudice is forgotten which made the son responsible for the father's actions. Review your life, Albert. Although it is only just beginning, did a lovely summer's day ever dawn with greater purity than has marked the commencement of your career? No, Albert. Take my advice. You are young and rich. Leave Paris. All is soon forgotten in this great Babylon of excitement and changing tastes. You will return after 3 or 4 years with a Russian princess for a bride, and no one will think more of what occurred yesterday than if it had happened 16 years ago." "Thank you, my dear Beauchamp. Thank you for the excellent feeling which prompts your advice, but it cannot be. I have told you my wish, or rather my determination. You understand that, interested as I am in this affair, I cannot see it in the same light as you do. What appears to you to emanate from a celestial source seems to me to proceed from one far less pure. Providence appears to me to have no share in this affair, and happily so, for instead of the invisible, impalpable agent of celestial rewards and punishments, I shall find one both palpable and visible, on whom I shall revenge myself, I assure you, for all I have suffered during the last month. Now, I repeat, Beauchamp, I wish to return to human and material existence, and if you are still the friend you profess to be, help me to discover the hand that struck the blow." "Be it so," said Beauchamp. "If you must have me descend to earth, I submit. And if you will seek your enemy, I will assist you, and I will engage to find him, my honor being almost as deeply interested as yours." "Well, then, you understand, Beauchamp, that we begin our search immediately. Each moment's delay is an eternity for me. The calumniator is not yet punished, and he may hope that he will not be. But, on my honor, if he thinks so, he deceives himself." "Well, listen, Morcerf." "Ah, Beauchamp, I see you know something already. You will restore me to life. I do not say there is any truth in what I am going to tell you, but it is, at least, a ray of light in a dark night. By following it, we may, perhaps, discover something more certain." "Tell me, satisfy my impatience." "Well, I will tell you what I did not like to mention on my return from Yanina." "Say on." "I went, of course, to the chief banker of the town to make inquiries, at the first word, before I had even mentioned your father's name. 'Ah,' said he, 'I guess what brings you here.' 'How, and why?' 'Because a fortnight since I was questioned on the same subject.' 'By whom?' 'By a banker of Paris, my correspondent.' 'Whose name is?' 'Danglars.' 'He!' cried Albert. 'Yes, it is indeed he who has so long pursued my father with jealous hatred. He, the man who would be popular, cannot forgive the Count of Morcerf for being created a peer, and this marriage broken off without a reason being assigned. Yes, it is all from the same cause. Make inquiries, Albert, but do not be angry without reason. Make inquiries, and if it be true—" "Oh, yes, if it be true," cried the young man, "he shall pay me all I have suffered." "Beware, Morcerf, he is already an old man. I will respect his age, as he has respected the honor of my family. If my father had offended him, why did he not attack him personally? Oh, no, He was afraid to encounter him face to face. I do not condemn you, Albert. I only restrain you. Act prudently. Oh, do not fear. Besides, you will accompany me. Beauchamp, solemn transactions should be sanctioned by a witness. Before this day closes, if Mr. Danglars is guilty, he shall cease to live, or I shall die. Pardieu, Beauchamp, mine shall be a splendid funeral. When such resolutions are made, Albert, they should be promptly executed. Do you wish to go to Mr. Danglars? Let us go immediately. They sent for a cabriolet. On entering the banker's mansion, they perceived the phaeton and servant of Mr. Andrea Cavalcanti. Ah, parbleu, that's good, said Albert, with a gloomy tone. If Mr. Danglars will not fight with me, I will kill his son-in-law. Cavalcanti will certainly fight. The servant announced the young man, but the banker, recollecting what had transpired the day before, did not wish him admitted. It was, however, too late. Albert had followed the footman, and, hearing the order given, forced the door open, and followed by Beauchamp, found himself in the banker's study. Sir, cried the latter, am I no longer at liberty to receive whom I choose in my house? You appear to forget yourself sadly. No, sir, said Albert coldly. There are circumstances in which one cannot, except through cowardice. I offer you that refuge. Refuse to admit certain persons, at least. What is your errand, then, with me, sir? I mean, said Albert, drawing near, and without apparently noticing Cavalcanti, who stood with his back towards the fireplace. I mean to propose a meeting in some retired corner where no one will interrupt us for 10 minutes. That will be sufficient. Where two men having met, one of them will remain on the ground. Danglars turned pale. Cavalcanti moved a step forward, and Albert turned towards him. And you too, said he. Come, if you like, monsieur. You have a claim, being almost one of the family, and I will give as many rendezvous of that kind as I can find persons willing to accept them. Cavalcanti looked at Danglars with a stupefied air, and the latter, making an effort, arose and stepped between the two young men. Albert's attack on Andrea had placed him on a different footing, and he hoped this visit had another cause than that he had first supposed. Indeed, sir, said he to Albert, if you are come to quarrel with this gentleman because I have preferred him to you, I shall resign the case to the king's attorney. You mistake, sir, said Morcerf with a gloomy smile. I am not referring to the least of matrimony, and I only addressed myself to Mr. Cavalcanti because he appeared disposed to interfere between us. In one respect you are right, for I am ready to quarrel with everyone today. But you have the first claim, Mr. Danglars. Sir, replied Danglars, pale with anger and fear, I warn you, when I have the misfortune to meet with a mad dog, I kill it. And far from thinking myself guilty of a crime, I believe I do society a kindness. Now, if you are mad and try to bite me, I will kill you without pity. Is it my fault that your father has dishonored himself? Yes, miserable wretch, cried Morcerf, it is your fault. Danglars retreated a few steps. My fault, said he. You must be mad. What do I know of the Grecian affair? Have I travelled in that country? Did I advise your father to sell the castle of Yanina, to betray— Silence, said Albert, with a thundering voice. No, it is not you who have directly made this exposure and brought this sorrow on us, but you hypocritically provoked it. I? Yes, you. How came it known? I suppose you read it in the paper in the account from Yanina. Who wrote to Yanina? To Yanina? Yes. Who wrote for particulars concerning my father? I imagine anyone may write to Yanina. But one person only wrote. One only? Yes, and that was you. I, doubtless, wrote. It appears to me that when about to marry your daughter to a young man, it is right to make some inquiries respecting his family. It is not only a right, but a duty. You wrote, sir, knowing what answer you would receive. I, indeed? I assure you, cried Danglars, with a confidence and security proceeding less from fear than from the interest he really felt for the young man. I solemnly declare to you that I should never have thought of writing to Yanina, did I know anything of Ali Pasha's misfortunes. Who, then, urged you to write? Tell me. Pardieu, it was the most simple thing in the world. I was speaking of your father's past history. I said the origin of his fortune remained obscure. The person to whom I addressed my scruples asked me where your father had acquired his property. I answered, in Greece. Then, said he, write to Yanina. And who thus advised you? No other than your friend, Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo told you to write to Yanina. Yes, and I wrote, and will show you my correspondence, if you like. Albert and Beauchamp looked at each other. Sir, said Beauchamp, who had not yet spoken, you appear to accuse the Count, who is absent from Paris at this moment, and cannot justify himself. I accuse no one, sir, said Danglars. I relate, and I will repeat before the Count what I have said to you. Does the Count know what answer you received? Yes, I showed it to him. Did he know my father's Christian name was Fernand, and his family name Mondego? Yes, I had told him that long since, and I did only what any other would have done in my circumstances, and perhaps less. When, the day after the arrival of this answer, your father came by the advice of Monte Cristo to ask my daughter's hand for you, I decidedly refused him, but without any explanation or exposure. In short, why should I have any more to do with the affair? How did the honor or disgrace of M. de Morcerf affect me? It neither increased nor decreased my income. Albert felt the blood mounting to his brow. There was no doubt upon the subject. Danglars defended himself with the baseness, but at the same time with the assurance, of a man who speaks the truth, at least in part, if not wholly, not for conscience sake, but through fear. Besides, what was Morcerf seeking? It was not whether Danglars or Monte Cristo was more or less guilty. It was a man who would answer for the offense, whether trifling or serious. It was a man who would fight, and it was evident Danglars would not fight. In addition to this, everything forgotten or unperceived before presented itself now to his recollection. Monte Cristo knew everything, as he had bought the daughter of Ali Pasha, and, knowing everything, he had advised Danglars to write to Yanina. The answer known, he had yielded to Albert's wish to be introduced to Haydée, and allowed the conversation to turn on the death of Ali, and had not opposed Haydée's recital. Besides, had he not begged of Morcerf not to mention his father's name before Haydée? Lastly, he had taken Albert to Normandy when he knew the final blow was near. There could be no doubt that all had been calculated and previously arranged. Monte Cristo then was in league with his father's enemies. Albert took Beauchamp aside and communicated these ideas to him. You are right, said the latter. Mr. Danglars has only been a secondary agent in this sad affair, and it is of M. de Monte Cristo that you must demand an explanation. Albert turned. Sir, said he to Danglars, understand that I do not take a final leave of you. I must ascertain if your insinuations are just, and am going now to inquire of the Count of Monte Cristo. He bowed to the banker, and went out with Beauchamp, without appearing to notice Cavalcanti. Danglars accompanied him to the door, where he again assured Albert that no motive of personal hatred had influenced him against the Count of Morcerf. Chapter 88. The Insult. At the banker's door, Beauchamp stopped Morcerf. Listen, said he. Just now I told you it was of M. de Monte Cristo you must demand an explanation. Yes, and we are going to his house. Reflect, Morcerf, one moment before you go. On what shall I reflect? On the importance of the step you are taking. Is it more serious than going to Mr. Danglars? Yes, Mr. Danglars is a money lover, and those who love money, you know, think too much of what they risk to be easily induced to fight a duel. The other is, on the contrary, to all appearance a true nobleman. But do you not fear to find him a bully? I only fear one thing, namely, to find a man who will not fight. Do not be alarmed, said Beauchamp. He will meet you. My only fear is that he will be too strong for you. My friend, said Morcerf, with a sweet smile, that is what I wish. The happiest thing that could occur to me would be to die in my father's stead. That would save us all. Your mother would die of grief. My poor mother, said Albert, passing his hand across his eyes. I know she would, but better so than die of shame. Are you quite decided, Albert? Yes, let us go. But do you think we shall find the Count at home? He intended to return some hours after me, and doubtless he is now at home. They ordered the driver to take them to number 30 Champs-Élysées. Beauchamp wished to go in alone, but Albert observed that as this was an unusual circumstance, he might be allowed to deviate from the usual etiquette of duels. The course which the young man espoused was one so sacred that Beauchamp had only to comply with all his wishes. He yielded and contented himself with following Morcerf. Albert sprang from the porter's lodge to the steps. He was received by Baptistin. The Count had, indeed, just arrived, but he was in his bath, and had forbidden that anyone should be admitted. But after his bath, asked Morcerf, my master will go to dinner, and after dinner he will sleep an hour. Then he is going to the opera. Are you sure of it? Asked Albert. Quite, sir. My master has ordered his horses at 8 o'clock precisely. Very good, replied Albert. That is all I wish to know. Then, turning towards Beauchamp, if you have anything to attend to, Beauchamp, do it directly. If you have any appointment for this evening, defer it till tomorrow. I depend on you to accompany me to the opera, and if you can, bring Chateauneuf with you. Beauchamp availed himself of Albert's permission, and left him, promising to call for him at 8:15. On his return home, Albert expressed his wish to Franz Debray and Morrel to see them at the opera that evening. Then he went to see his mother, who since the events of the day before had refused to see anyone, and had kept her room. He found her in bed, overwhelmed with grief at this public humiliation. The sight of Albert produced the effect which might naturally be expected on Mercédès. She pressed her son's hand and sobbed aloud, but her tears relieved her. Albert stood one moment speechless by the side of his mother's bed. It was evident from his pale face and knit brows that his resolution to revenge himself was growing weaker. My dear mother, said he, do you know if M. de Morcerf has any enemy? Mercédès started. She noticed that the young man did not say, my father. My son, she said, persons in the Count's situation have many secret enemies. Those who are known are not the most dangerous. I know it, and appeal to your penetration. You are of so superior a mind, nothing escapes you. Why do you say so? Because, for instance, you noticed on the evening of the ball we gave that M. de Monte Cristo would eat nothing in our house. Mercédès raised herself on her feverish arm. M. de Monte Cristo, she exclaimed, and how is he connected with the question you asked me? You know, mother, M. de Monte Cristo is almost an Oriental, and it is customary with the Orientals to secure full liberty for revenge by not eating or drinking in the houses of their enemies. Do you say M. de Monte Cristo is our enemy? Replied Mercédès, becoming paler than the sheet which covered her. Who told you so? Why, you are mad, Albert. M. de Monte Cristo has only shown us kindness. M. de Monte Cristo saved your life. You yourself presented him to us. Oh, I entreat you, my son, if you had entertained such an idea, dispel it, and my counsel to you, nay, my prayer, is to retain his friendship. Mother, replied the young man, you have special reasons for telling me to conciliate that man. I, said Mercédès, blushing as rapidly as she had turned pale, and again becoming paler than ever. Yes, doubtless. And is it not that he may never do us any harm? Mercédès shuddered, and, fixing on her son a scrutinizing gaze, You speak strangely, said she to Albert, and you appear to have some singular prejudices. What has the Count done? 3 days since you were with him in Normandy. Only 3 days since we looked on him as our best friend. An ironical smile passed over Albert's lips. Mercédès saw it, and with the double instinct of woman and mother guessed all. But as she was prudent and strong-minded, she concealed both her sorrows and her fears. Albert was silent. An instant after, the Countess resumed. You came to inquire after my health. I will candidly acknowledge that I am not well. You should install yourself here, and cheer my solitude. I do not wish to be left alone." "Mother," said the young man, "you know how gladly I would obey your wish, but an urgent and important affair obliges me to leave you for the whole evening." "Well," replied Mercédès, sighing, "go, Albert. I will not make you a slave to your filial piety." Albert pretended he did not hear, bowed to his mother, and quitted her. Scarcely had he shut her door when Mercédès called a confidential servant and ordered him to follow Albert wherever he should go that evening, and to come and tell her immediately what he observed. Then she rang for her lady's maid, and, weak as she was, she dressed, in order to be ready for whatever might happen. The footman's mission was an easy one. Albert went to his room, and dressed with unusual care. At 8:10, Beauchamp arrived. He had seen Château Renaud, who had promised to be in the orchestra before the curtain was raised. Both got into Albert's coupé, and, as the young man had no reason to conceal where he was going, he called aloud, "To the opera!" In his impatience, he arrived before the beginning of the performance. Château Renaud was at his post. Apprised by Beauchamp of the circumstances, he required no explanation from Albert. The conduct of the son in seeking to avenge his father was so natural that Château Renaud did not seek to dissuade him, and was content with renewing his assurances of devotion. Debray was not yet come, but Albert knew that he seldom lost a scene at the opera. Albert wandered about the theatre until the curtain was drawn up. He hoped to meet with M. de Monte Cristo either in the lobby or on the stairs. The bell summoned him to his seat, and he entered the orchestra with Château Renaud and Beauchamp. But his eyes scarcely quitted the box between the columns, which remained obstinately closed during the whole of the first act. At last, as Albert was looking at his watch for about the 100th time, at the beginning of the second act the door opened, and Monte Cristo entered, dressed in black, and, leaning over the front of the box, looked around the pit. Morrel followed him, and looked also for his sister and brother-in-law. He soon discovered them in another box, and kissed his hand to them. The Count, in his survey of the pit, encountered a pale face and threatening eyes, which evidently sought to gain his attention. He recognized Albert, but thought it better not to notice him, as he looked so angry and discomposed. Without communicating his thoughts to his companion, he sat down, drew out his opera glass, and looked another way. Although apparently not noticing Albert, he did not, however, lose sight of him, and when the curtain fell at the end of the second act, he saw him leave the orchestra with his two friends. Then his head was seen passing at the back of the boxes, and the Count knew that the approaching storm was intended to fall on him. He was at the moment conversing cheerfully with Morrel, but he was well prepared for what might happen. The door opened, and Monte Cristo, turning round, saw Albert, pale and trembling, followed by Beauchamp and Château Renaud. "Well," cried he, with that benevolent politeness which distinguished his salutation from the common civilities of the world, "my cavalier has attained his object. Good evening, Monsieur de Morcerf." The countenance of this man, who possessed such extraordinary control over his feelings, expressed the most perfect cordiality. Morrel only then recollected the letter he had received from the Viscount, in which, without assigning any reason, he begged him to go to the opera, but he understood that something terrible was brooding. "We are not come here, sir, to exchange hypocritical expressions of politeness or false professions of friendship," said Albert, "but to demand an explanation." The young man's trembling voice was scarcely audible. "An explanation at the opera," said the Count, with that calm tone and penetrating eye which characterized a man who knows his cause is good. "Little acquainted as I am with the habits of Parisians, I should not have thought this the place for such a demand." "Still, if people will shut themselves up," said Albert, "and cannot be seen because they are bathing, dining, or asleep, we must avail ourselves of the opportunity whenever they are to be seen." "I am not difficult of access, sir, for yesterday, if my memory does not deceive me, you were at my house." "Yesterday I was at your house, sir," said the young man, "because then I knew not who you were." In pronouncing these words, Albert had raised his voice so as to be heard by those in the adjoining boxes and in the lobby. Thus the attention of many was attracted by this altercation. "Where are you come from, sir?" said Monte Cristo. "You do not appear to be in the possession of your senses." "Provided I understand your perfidy, sir, and succeed in making you understand that I will be revenged, I shall be reasonable enough," said Albert furiously. "I do not understand you, sir," replied Monte Cristo, "and if I did, your tone is too high. I am at home here, and I alone have a right to raise my voice above another's. Leave the box, sir." Monte Cristo pointed towards the door with the most commanding dignity. "Ah, I shall know how to make you leave your home," replied Albert, clasping in his convulsed grasp the glove, which Monte Cristo did not lose sight of. "Well, well," said Monte Cristo quietly, "I see you wish to quarrel with me, but I would give you one piece of advice, which you will do well to keep in mind. It is in poor taste to make a display of a challenge. Display is not becoming to everyone, Monsieur de Morcerf." At this name a murmur of astonishment passed around the group of spectators of the scene. They had talked of no one but Morcerf the whole day. Albert understood the allusion in a moment, and was about to throw his glove at the Count, when Morrel seized his hand, while Beauchamp and Chateaurenaud, fearing the scene would surpass the limits of a challenge, held him back. But Monte Cristo, without rising and leaning forward in his chair, merely stretched out his arm and, taking the damp, crushed glove from the clenched hand of the young man, "Sir," said he in a solemn tone, "I consider your glove thrown, and will return it to you wrapped around a bullet. Now leave me, or I will summon my servants to throw you out at the door." Wild, almost unconscious, and with eyes inflamed, Albert stepped back, and Morrel closed the door. Monte Cristo took up his glass again as if nothing had happened. His face was like marble, and his heart was like bronze. Morrel whispered, "What have you done to him?" "I? Nothing, at least personally," said Monte Cristo. "But there must be some cause for this strange scene. The Count of Morcerf's adventure exasperates the young man. Have you anything to do with it?" It was through Haydée that the chamber was informed of his father's treason. "Indeed," said Morrel, "I had been told, but would not credit it, that the Grecian slave I have seen with you here in this very box was the daughter of Ali Pasha." "It is true, nevertheless." "Then," said Morrel, "I understand it all, and this scene was premeditated." "How so?" "Yes, Albert wrote to request me to come to the opera, doubtless that I might be a witness to the insult he meant to offer you." "Probably," said Monte Cristo with his imperturbable tranquillity. "But what shall you do with him?" "With whom?" "With Albert." "What shall I do with Albert? As certainly, Maximilian, as I now press your hand. I shall kill him before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." Morrel, in his turn, took Monte Cristo's hand in both of his, and he shuddered to feel how cold and steady it was. "Ah, Count," said he, "his father loves him so much." "Do not speak to me of that," said Monte Cristo, with the first movement of anger he had betrayed. "I will make him suffer." Morrel, amazed, let fall Monte Cristo's hand. "Count, Count," said he. "Dear Maximilian," interrupted the Count, "listen how adorably Dupré is singing that line. "O Mathilde, idole de mon âme." I was the first to discover Dupré at Naples, and the first to applaud him. Bravo, bravo." Morrel saw it was useless to say more, and refrained. The curtain, which had risen at the close of the scene with Albert, again fell, and a rap was heard at the door. "Come in," said Monte Cristo with a voice that betrayed not the least emotion, and immediately Beauchamp appeared. "Good evening, Monsieur Beauchamp," said Monte Cristo, as if this was the first time he had seen the journalist that evening. "Be seated." Beauchamp bowed, and sitting down. "Sir," said he, "I just now accompanied Monsieur de Morcerf, as you saw." "And that means," replied Monte Cristo, laughing, "that you had, probably, just dined together. I am happy to see, Monsieur Beauchamp, that you are more sober than he was." "Sir," said Monsieur Beauchamp, "Albert was wrong. I acknowledge, to betray so much anger, and I come, on my own account, to apologize for him. And having done so, entirely on my own account, be it understood, I would add that I believe you too gentlemanly to refuse giving him some explanation concerning your connection with Janina. Then I will add 2 words about the young Greek girl. Monte Cristo motioned him to be silent. Come, said he, laughing, there are all my hopes about to be destroyed. How so? Asked Beauchamp. Doubtless you wish to make me appear a very eccentric character. I am, in your opinion, a Lara, a Manfred, a Lord Ruthven. Then, just as I am arriving at the climax, you defeat your own end, and seek to make an ordinary man of me. You bring me down to your own level, and demand explanations. Indeed, Monsieur Beauchamp, it is quite laughable. Yet, replied Beauchamp haughtily, there are occasions when probity commands. Monsieur Beauchamp, interposed this strange man, the Count of Monte Cristo bows to none but the Count of Monte Cristo himself. Say no more, I entreat you. I do what I please, Monsieur Beauchamp, and it is always well done. Sir, replied the young man, honest men are not to be paid with such coin. I require honorable guarantees. I am, sir, a living guarantee, replied Monte Cristo, motionless, but with a threatening look. We have both blood in our veins which we wish to shed. That is our mutual guarantee. Tell the Viscount so, and that tomorrow, before 10 o'clock, I shall see what color his is. Then I have only to make arrangements for the duel, said Beauchamp. It is quite immaterial to me, said Monte Cristo, and it was very unnecessary to disturb me at the opera for such a trifle. In France people fight with the sword or pistol, in the colonies with the carbine, in Arabia with the dagger. Tell your client that, although I am the insulted party, in order to carry out my eccentricity, I leave him the choice of arms, and will accept without discussion, without dispute, anything, even combat by drawing lots, which is always stupid, but with me different from other people, as I am sure to gain. Sure to gain, repeated Beauchamp, looking with amazement at the Count. Certainly, said Monte Cristo, slightly shrugging his shoulders. Otherwise I would not fight with M. de Morcerf. I shall kill him. I cannot help it. Only by a single line this evening at my house let me know the arms and the hour. I do not like to be kept waiting. Pistols, then, at 8 o'clock, in the Bois de Vincennes, said Beauchamp, quite disconcerted, not knowing if he was dealing with an arrogant braggadocio or a supernatural being. Very well, sir, said Monte Cristo. Now all that is settled, do let me see the performance, and tell your friend Albert not to come any more this evening. He will hurt himself with all his ill-chosen barbarisms. Let him go home and go to sleep. Beauchamp left the box, perfectly amazed. Now, said Monte Cristo, turning towards Morrel, I may depend upon you, may I not? Certainly, said Morrel. I am at your service, Count. Still, what? It is desirable I should know the real cause. That is to say, you would rather not? No. The young man himself is acting blindfold, and knows not the true cause, which is known only to God and to me. But I give you my word, Morrel, that God, who does know it, will be on our side. Enough, said Morrel. Who is your second witness? I know no one in Paris, Morrel, on whom I could confer that honor besides you and your brother Emmanuel. Do you think Emmanuel would oblige me? I will answer for him, Count. Well, that is all I require. Tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, you will be with me, will you not? We will. Hush, the curtain is rising. Listen, I never lose a note of this opera if I can afford it. The music of William Tell is so sweet.